What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and we have about 48 hours until kickoff here on Sunday, so why not talk through some last-minute trades you can make to win your fantasy football league here in Week 11. We're going to talk through about 6 trade targets, or actually 7 trade targets here, with the idea around late season pushes. I know a lot of you guys have asked me, Ron, how do you feel about rest of season? Who are some of the players to pick up that have really nice schedules down the stretch? That's going to be the focus of this video. Who are guys that you can buy low now that have very forgiving schedules in the playoffs when things really matter for your championship odds? And then we'll also talk through some players where if you're scrapping a season together here and you're 4-6 and you need a win, how can you kind of attack that and move forward and maybe trade off some bye weeks for some other players here as we look forward to the home stretch. As always, if you guys enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new. Let's go.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen. She gon' let me.
Now, our first buys here are going to be for those of you guys out there that are doing very well. All right, if you are out here, playoffs look pretty much locked up. The first 3 or 4 buys here will be guys you're going to buy right now. They're on a bye week. If this player is on a team that needs a win here, you can kind of, tap him on the shoulder, trade for this player while he's on bye, give him immediate production in Week 11, and then move forward with a guy who has a really killer playoff schedule. And the first name we'll talk about here is James Conner. If you need an RB2, especially right now, this is the perfect time to consolidate, where maybe you went into the season with a hero RB build and you have a bunch of bench depth right now. You're pretty much locked up into the playoffs, but your RB2 is, let's say it was like Javonte Williams or, something just not great like Rico Dowdle or something like that you've been rolling with and you just had a really good team. You can go out there, go see if you can get James Conner, see if you can put together, a 2-for-1 where you get 2 players in the deal, you get James Conner. It's not going to be like a super buy low, but again, he is on bye. He's like the RB17 in points per game right now. It kind of depends on what you want to do in terms of minimum games played with the players around him. He's on bye this week. He's a fine RB2, but he could be an RB1 down the stretch, right? Like he's RB17, but if he was like RB8 from weeks 14 through 17, it wouldn't shock me at all. He's right now still completely defying any age curves at this point. He is the 6th best graded running back on PFF. He leads all running backs missed tackles forced. And when we look at his late season schedule, we're going to look at 2 things here for the running backs. We have fantasy points allowed, right, which is just number 1 is Carolina. They are allowing the most fantasy points per game. So they're going to be number 1. Minnesota is his only tough schedule or his only tough matchup here. And then EPA per rush is less of a fantasy points allowed, and it's more of a just how good in real life football is your team at defending the run, which EPA per play is just, if on a given drive you are expected to get a field goal and you come in with a touchdown, that would be 4 expected points or 4 points over expected. Now, just a way of sort of contextualizing, right? Again, if you have like 4th and 2 and your player gets 3 yards per carry doesn't look great, but if you convert the first down, that gives you a huge boost. So it's not just so much like how many yards are you allowing, but how many, first downs, touchdowns. It's yards, but it's kind of contextualized is what EPA would be. So with James Conner, his late season schedule, right? He's on bye this week. Then you have Seattle, who is allowing the 11th most points to running backs. They are the 9th worst rushing defense out there. Minnesota's a tough one, but then they get Seattle again. They get New England, who's allowing the 8th most fantasy points to running backs. Carolina, who's allowing the 1st most. And then kind of a neutral matchup versus the Rams at the home stretch, Week 17 here. But that game could be fireworks, right? Like Stafford versus Kyler could potentially be the division on the line there. Right now, the NFC West is super, super close. We'll see how that game sort of shakes out. But I think that is a nice schedule here down the stretch. You can buy low as we get going. Now, as always with these trade target videos, let's look at the Fantasy Calc trade database. So you can see that's the link up there, so I don't have to put it down below in the description. This is just simply trades that have happened in actual leagues. I've had people comment before, like, hey, Ron, this is a trade that I made. This is just going to be real trades out there that we kind of just see, like, what can we actually trade to get James Conner here over the last few days? We'll do 2 to 4 trade assets, 1 quarterback, half PPR, full PPR, and we'll see what he's going for in leagues right now. I hope it's not too much. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. They have it as 386. I would do this pretty easily. And Pacheco for Conner. Pacheco, I do just want to do a side tangent on Pacheco, and I'm open to looking like an idiot at the end of the season. But his injury was brutal. Kareem Hunt's not been great, but he has been a guy. And I could see this being kind of an ugly split down the stretch for both Chiefs running backs, where Pacheco's not effective, and then Kareem Hunt's also eating into that opportunity share. And Pacheco's just not a guy that's going to like win leagues or be super effective. This is the same injury that zapped Pollard of his athleticism last year. Mark Andrews, same thing. So we'll see. But if I could use Pacheco and like another piece, I would. But I will say in this scenario, we are looking for a guy where, we give them immediate production for something else. Pacheco is not really immediate production. Let's see. Ridley and Laporta. I would. If somebody wants to buy Ridley, let's say Ridley's not even in your starting lineup, but let's say that he's just like on the bench. It's like what's this? A start 8. This is a 3 wide receiver, 1 flex league. And if Ridley's not in your starting lineup, I will say something that we want to preach in this video is we build teams a certain way in the offseason, but in leagues where you can make trades and stuff, and let's say you just have a bunch of depth and you're doing just fine there, this is where you want to start putting together, like, what does my lineup look like as we get going here? Maybe if you're somebody who relied on a Bucky Irving at one point, or a Tank Bigsby at one point, or one of these running backs that have kind of flamed out a little bit, and looking at your RB2 spots a little weak, I wouldn't mind doing a deal like this, especially like, Laporta's in here as well, but I know a lot of you guys who have Laporta might already have Hunter Henry behind him, or Cade Otton behind him. A lot of like 2 tight end teams here, maybe like Hawkinson as well. So if you don't need Laporta, you can, match him up with a Ridley. I would do that as well. This one works as well. Najee and Khalil Shakir easily. Najee and Tank Dell. Now that Nico Collins is back, I'd be fine with that. I am not doing Chase Brown for James Conner. I don't think Downs for Conner is really on the table here. We'll look for one more. I would do this. I like Jawan Jennings, but if he's not making your starting lineup, go move him for Conner. I will say that's probably not going to work, but if you could do Jennings and a piece, Jennings and a Jalen Warren, or Jennings and I'm trying to think of like what would kind of make this even. I think you could do like a Warren or a Nick Chubb, something like that to get there. Let's see. Let's move forward to our next trade target here. I try to find like 3 or 4 that make sense. Not all of those trades are going to be super realistic, but just to give you an idea of what I would be looking to do. Our next one's going to be, again, these first few guys will be players who are on bye. So we have Malik Nabers here. All right. He's in a little bit of a rut. He's not doing great. This is a stat that I pulled on Twitter today. Before his injury, when we look at expected points per game, so just based on your volume, your targets, your ADOT, your end zone targets, how many points should you be putting up versus your actual points per game? Through the first 4 weeks before his concussion, 22.4 expected points per game as the wide receiver 2. He had 22.9 points per game, so he actually exceeded that. Now, after the injury, this isn't to say that the reason that he's declining is because of his injury. It's actually because of Andrew Thomas. Josh Norris pointed this out the other day, that since they lost Andrew Thomas, Malik Nabers has struggled, which is going to give you from week 7 through 10, 16.8 expected points per game, which is still fine volume, especially right now where wide receiver is weak. Wide receiver 6 in overall volume is great, but he's only converting that into the wide receiver 25 in points per game at 12. I do think some of this is going to bounce back. We know that rookies stack their best games at the end of the year. We saw in the beginning of the year that he has a talent to maintain his volume. I don't think he's going to underperform his volume by 4.8 points. That's a lot. Like, that's a really bad inefficiency. And of course, it's not all on him. It's like Daniel Jones and inaccurate throws, but you expect it to go. He's not going to be like 0.5 above his expected total like he was weeks 1 through 4, but you would expect like probably 1 less. If his volume's 16.8 points per game, you'd hope that he's somewhere in the 14 points per game area, which right now that's like fringe wide receiver 1 production. And that's kind of what I'm expecting here down the stretch. He has a really, really good schedule when we look at how things line up. He has a bye week this week. So again, you're buying low. And then he gets Tampa, who's allowing the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Then you have Dallas at 14th, New Orleans at 11th, but New Orleans is one of the toughest defenses on here. But you have to remember, a lot of these numbers are affected by when they had Marshawn Lattimore. So you get a Marshawn Lattimore-less Saints. Then you get Baltimore. Then you get Atlanta. Then you get Indy as well. And I will say, I don't think I have the entire graphic here. I actually added QB pressure as well, because that's like the biggest issue for Daniel Jones right now. Let's see. Is this going to be it? Yep. So this is the biggest issue for Daniel Jones right now is the QB pressure, right? When you lose Andrew Thomas and you have, Jermaine Illuminor out there as your left tackle, it's not going to be all that pretty. But New Orleans, Baltimore, and Atlanta, right? So that weeks 14 through 16 area, they are 28th, 24th, and 32nd in QB pressure rate. So you would hope that maybe Daniel Jones, or it could be Drew Lock, that could be a fun change. I don't really know if that's an upgrade. It could just be a fun change. But I think there's multiple outs here, right? These are all really easy defenses. They are anywhere from the most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers to the 14th. So that's still, top half of the league in terms of allowing fantasy points. A lot of them aren't great defenses. The one that is a good defense lost Marshawn Lattimore. And there's a stretch there where 3 of them aren't really getting to the quarterback. So you would hope that would help. I would have Nabers as like a high-end wide receiver 2 rest of the way with massive upside, because we saw earlier, right? He was a 20-point per game wide receiver the first 4 games of the season. If he ended the season with like his last like 4 or 5 games at 20 points per game, it wouldn't shock me. This is a very talented player. I get people are fed up, but if I needed wide receiver, if I wanted some extra juice down the stretch, I would be absolutely fine trying to see what Malik Nabers could give me. Now, in terms of what he's trading for right now, let's see. Dobbins for Nabers straight up, I would do that. If I didn't need Dobbins, especially Dobbins is trending down a little bit right now. This one's tough because I would prefer Pickens straight up to Nabers. But this one, this is just junk. Pollard and Dobbs for Nabers. But again, maybe you can get away with that if somebody, like if this guy is truly in need, right? Like he is 4-6, needs a win, can't afford a bye week. This is where you have the leverage and you can definitely try and finesse a little bit. Brian Thomas and Ramondre, I think that's probably about even. I really like Ramondre rest of season. He's been getting a lot of volume. But if I didn't need the running back points, I would be fine with that as well. Let's find one more that makes sense. Yeah, this is another one. I don't think it's going to happen, though. Chubb and Jacoby. Let's see. James Conner straight up for Nabers. We just talked about Conner, but if you didn't need Conner, I could see that working. Let's find one more for the people. Pollard for Nabers straight up, I would do that as well. I don't know if that's really all that even, though. Kareem Hunt and Pittman, that's a good one. I will say we didn't get the sells, but Kareem Hunt's a great sell right now, where he's going to be like a fringe top 12 running back until Pacheco comes back, but Pacheco's going to come back in the next like week or 2. So if somebody needs immediate production right now, I would love this. But of course, like not Pittman, like probably a better receiver than this, like probably a, like a Jawan Jennings, a Darnell Mooney, something like that to get into Nabers. I would do that all day. Then our next trade target again on buy, and he's been a trade target of ours, like I think in like 2 or 3 videos this year. But Chuba Hubbard, man, he's on buy. And there's a lot of, pessimism surrounding, Jonathan Brooks coming back. I just think the way that you can get rich in 2024, even though I was drafting Jonathan Brooks, the reports from them, word of mouth from Canales, was that he was going to be playing by like week 5, 6, 7. That has not happened. He's coming off an ACL. By the time he even gets ramped up, it might be too late. And I would just be fine taking whatever discount there is, but again, because of the bye week, because of Jonathan Brooks looming, that you can get someone that's the RB 13 in points per game for like, high-end RB3 type of prices, and that is perfect. Now, he also has an amazing playoff schedule as well, where it's going to be a little bit of a slow stretch, so this is one of those things, I don't know, if you want to gamble and you want to wait until after the bye, and then wait until he plays KC, and then buy him after that, I don't know when your trade deadline is, and you can definitely try that, but I think right now is fine. And outside of the Philly game, right, in week 14, he plays Tampa, who's allowing the 9th most fantasy points to running backs, then Dallas, who's allowing the 3rd most, Arizona is allowing the 10th most, and then Tampa Bay is allowing the 9th most. So that's 4 out of his last 5 are allowing inside of the top 10 most fantasy points to running backs. So those are cupcake matchups for Chuba Hubbard, who has been absolutely crushing it. Now looking at what you can get when you're trading for Hubbard, let's see. Is he still trading at like an RB3 price tag? He's actually kind of not. If I didn't need Hawkinson, I would trade Hawkinson for him. All right, people are actually spending a lot for him. Mooney and Rachaad White, that's really close. A lot of these are really close. All right, he's trading for more than I would have thought. I'll be honest with you guys. Yeah, I'm not doing Pickens straight up for him. Garrett Wilson for Hubbard, probably not. You're not going to get Keenan Allen for Hubbard. So we're seeing stuff on 2 sides of the spectrum right now. Kareem Hunt and Talbert. Not Talbert, but Kareem Hunt and something for Hubbard is what I would be looking for. That's just a whole bunch of junk. If you can do that 3-for-1 for Hubbard, you should. But let's see. Can I find one more? Ridley for Hubbard, I would. Mooney for Hubbard. This is ideal. Maybe add like a running back to Mooney. Whether that's a Tank Bigsby, it could be like the handcuff to his RB1, something like that. And then that will probably do it. But yeah, like this is what I'm looking for. Like Sutton, Darnell Mooney for Hubbard on teams that need wide receivers. And can't afford, again, all these guys are on bye. You're hoping that these players are on a team that can't afford to take a loss this week, and you kind of have some leverage there. So those are the kind of deals I'd be doing. I'm not paying. I mean, I saw one of them in there, like George Pickens for Chuba Hubbard. I would say I am all good on that. Now, our last buy here, again, I know we have a bunch of luxury buys up top. We're going to get to the buys for those of you guys out there that are kind of scratching and clawing here, but our fourth buy is Rachaad White. It's also weird how so many of these guys on buy also have really good playoff schedules, but we have Rachaad White. This one's low-key. I think you can get him for probably the cheapest of all the guys we've mentioned so far. You can see here is the RB22 on the year. Of course, it's not points per game. He's more of like an RB3 in terms of points per game, but he scored points. Over his last 4 weeks, he's the RB8 in points per game. He also has the 5th most targets on the season at running back with 40. So he's getting a lot of targets. He's actually scoring the last 4 weeks. He's on bye now. Now, it's a playoff, it's a split backfield, but I don't mind, like, if you don't have a lot of assets to make a trade and you want to just get like a low-key, like, man, I need some RB2 help, Rachaad White is perfect for that, and his playoff schedule is amazing. When we look at fantasy points allowed to the running back position, he comes back 15th most by the Giants, then Carolina's the most, then Vegas is the 7th most, Chargers are a tough one, then Dallas are the 3rd most, Carolina's the 1st most. So he gets Carolina twice the rest of the season, who is allowing the most fantasy points to running backs. And then I added, this is a stat from JJ Zacharyson. He has a data dump he does every single week. I would very much recommend subscribing to his Patreon and seeing what that looks like. But we have, so the two matchups that aren't great on paper are actually pretty good for him as someone that's a pass-catching running back, where in week 12, the Giants actually allowed the 3rd highest target share to opposing running backs. So that's perfect for Rachaad White. And then the Chargers, they're not allowing a lot of fantasy points to running backs, but if one of the two between Bucky Irving and Rachaad White was to, play well versus the Chargers, it would be Rachaad White, because the Chargers are allowing the 2nd highest target share to opposing running backs, with 24.2% of their opposing team's targets going to the running back. So rest of the way, Rachaad White has a really, really easy kind of runway here. We do get one of these running backs. I talked about it on, I think it was the Waiver Wire show. Every year you're going to get one of these running backs like Jerick McKinnon 2 years ago. I'm trying to think of like who it was last year, but you get these guys down the stretch who just come out of nowhere and are league winners, and Rachaad White could be that guy. I wasn't even really drafting him, but there is something there for Rachaad White. I think as well with Bucky Irving, but Rachaad White's kind of been overshadowed by like the new toy in Bucky Irving, but I do think that Rachaad White is probably a fine trade target as well when we look at what he's going for. Hoping it's not a lot. Banison for Rachaad White for sure. Now that Richardson's back, if Downs isn't in my starting lineup, I don't mind Downs for Rachaad White. Let's see. Tyrone Tracy for Rachaad White, probably not. Again, this is another one I would do, like Sutton for Rachaad White, Mooney for Rachaad White, Juwan Jennings for Rachaad White. Again, just like only if you're in like a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, and those receivers aren't getting into your lineup, but Rachaad White would. I would be doing a deal like that. Let's see if I can find one more that makes sense here. Yeah, like Rico Dowdle for Rachaad White. This is another one where, let's say the guy has Rachaad White. Like, this is actually the perfect example of, someone trying to buy a bye week off of you. Where let's say they have Rachaad White. Rachaad White's on bye. They can't afford to not have Rachaad White in their RB2 spot. You give them Rico Dowdle, or you give them, an Audric Estime, or you give them one of those type of guys where they can just plug them in. You take Rachaad White off the bye week, and you get a guy who has a lot of upside moving forward. Now, our other buys here are going to be less centered around buying low because of a bye week, but because we want to buy them low right now as they have really, really good playoff schedules. Now, I will say, speaking of the playoffs, make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. They sponsor the channel. They keep the lights on down here in the basement. They will match your first deposit up to $1,000 over on Underdog Fantasy. I have links down below in the description and the comment section down below where it can take you right there. Use promo code RON. You get a free first-time customer pick'em waiting for you as well. And on top of that, they now have playoff best ball in the NFL, which we will be streaming probably in the next couple of weeks. Next few weeks, we'll start streaming those, where those are very fun, where you kind of draft players that are on teams in the playoffs, and those are very fun. And then also, if you're into the NBA, they have a promo every day of the NBA in-season tournament in the pick'em lobby waiting for you. So plenty of stuff to go check out over on Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you check it out. Promo code RON will get your first deposit matched up to $1,000. Now with Jayden Reed, he is our, I think, 5th buy. This one is for a team that needs wins, or a team that just like wants to kind of load up for the stretch run, just get another receiver. I understand that people are kind of like souring on Jayden Reed, where he's the wide receiver 17 in points per game, but you wouldn't really know that if you ask people about Jayden Reed. He's coming off a bye week, so you can buy him low a little bit. He's on a little bit of a skid since his early season production, and he's still a good player that I want on my fantasy teams. He's super explosive. He has the 6th best yards per out run at 2.63. He's still been one of the top playmakers in the NFL. He has a lot of Debo traits to him, and I think down the stretch they will lean on that here as we get going. Now, if you want to wait a week or two, you certainly can, right? Like the schedule doesn't ease up until the end here, right? They get Chicago, 31st most points allowed. Then San Fran, 22nd. Then Miami, 27th. Now, I will say about Miami, their defense is pretty good, but they also, without Tua, have kind of made it a thing where they just have low-scoring games and not a lot of yards on either side. Now that Tua's back, their pass defense isn't great. You can see they are the 13th. They've allowed the 13th highest EPA per pass play, which isn't very good. But then you get Detroit, who's allowing the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers, even though that their defense is actually very good. And you get Seattle allowing the 12th most, New Orleans allowing the 11th most, and then again, no Marshawn Lattimore there, and then Minnesota allowing the 3rd most. You get those 4 final weeks where there could be some absolute fireworks for Jayden Reed. He's already shown it before. He could really turn up here for the stretch run. Now, let's see. Is he trading for anything too crazy? Again, I feel like I will say a better time to buy would have been last year or last week on the buy, but I think you can still probably buy him for a reasonable price here moving forward. Let's see. Hawkinson for Reed, I would do that pretty easily. Keon Coleman and Tyreek Hill, no, I can't do that. Waddle and Rachaad White, even though we just said Rachaad White's a buy, I would do this. I'm fully out on Jalen Waddle. McLaurin for Jayden Reed, probably not. I would do T. Higgins for Jayden Reed. T. Higgins in like a piece for Jayden Reed, I'd be fine with that. Bucky Irving for Jayden Reed, I mean, obviously, yes. Worthy and Javonte, I mean, that's ridiculous. Swift for Jayden Reed. I would also do this JSN. You can't see it here, but I would also do this JSN for Jayden Reed trade as well. But I don't know why anyone would do that. But Swift, I would. I don't mind it if I needed the wide receiver help personally. Now, moving on from that, we have Ladd Mcconkey. His teammates were calling him Ladidi McConkey. I can't get it out of my head since they did that. But this is where, late season upside, looking for a push here down the stretch. I show this chart so much that you guys probably hate it. Shout out to Jack Miller. But rookie wide receivers, they get more production as the year goes on. I could 100% see Ladd McConkey being one of these guys like we've seen in the past. Christian Watson went nuclear his rookie year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Rashee Rice. It would not shock me at all if Ladd McConkey could be this despite being outside the top 30 wide receivers in points per game right now. Then it just speaks to what his upside could be down the stretch, that he's not in there as we speak. Now, I do want to say big shout out to Matt Harmon. Please, 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 I'm kind of blowing up his spot here showing any of this stuff. This is all paywalled content, all right? So make sure you check out Reception Perception. Matt Harmon does great work. We have him on all the time on the channel. He has 9 rookie wide receiver reception perception midseason reports out right now, and it's all really, really good info. You have Marv, Brian Thomas, you got Nabers, Odunze, Keon Coleman, Ladd, you got Leggett, Worthy, Coker. So he's going to be adding more of them as we go here as well. So make sure you check out that. Please do. Reception Perception, one of the best tools in all of fantasy football. And I want to show you guys Ladd McConkey because it's pretty ridiculous, man. This is nuts. You can see here the ones that he has linked down below are, I believe, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s. Ladd McConkey's only red route is the slant. He is above expectation in terms of success rate at every single route besides the slant. That is amazing. I was really blown away. I was sort of reading through his reception perception here because when Matt drops one of these, I just scroll through every single profile. He does a great job. And Ladd McConkey, of these 9 rookie receivers, first best first man coverage and success rate, second best first zone, first best versus press. He is an absolute monster. He's over 2 yards per out run. I want to say he's over 10% first downs per out run. He is hitting everything we want on a per route basis. And then we're also seeing Justin Herbert heat up here. They're passing the ball more here as well. I think it's a matter of time until Ladd McConkey gets going. And his playoff schedule isn't bad. It's not amazing, but it certainly is light here. He gets Cincinnati this week, who's allowing... Actually, I don't think that this is right for Ladd McConkey, now that I'm looking at it. I'm saying there's no way the Bengals are allowing the 15th most to wide receivers. Are they? Yeah, they are 15th most fantasy points to wide receivers. I thought early in the season that they were getting cooked, but they are the 7th worst pass EPA per play defense. Then he gets Baltimore. So Cincinnati and Baltimore are pretty light. Then he gets Atlanta, allowing the 10th most fantasy points to receivers. Then he gets KC, so that's a tough one. Tampa Bay is a great matchup. Denver's going to be the tough one. And then New England he should be fine with. Now, matchups, I will say, the reason why I shy away from these matchup things sometimes, I'm not the biggest believer in light playoff schedules. Sometimes a guy has the perfect matchup and it just falls through and he does not perform on it. You guys can kind of see that week to week, especially we've seen the Bears, right, where they've had, I guess last week was one, right, where Breece Hall had the Cardinals and that was supposed to be a smash spot and it just wasn't. So we'll see. But this is lighter. When we look over at the EPA per pass numbers instead of the fantasy points allowed numbers, you're getting the top half of, or I would call it the bottom half pass defenses where they're all not that great besides Denver. So it should be lighter. We should see more Justin Herbert passes. We should see more efficiency here. So I do really like Ladd Mcconkey for the stretch run. Let's see. I'm hoping, because every single one of these, I look at the trades and I'm like, man, he's going for a little bit more expensive than I would like. Let's see. Let's narrow it down to 2-for-1s or 1-for-1s here. Yeah, I love all these. Obviously, I would take Ladd over. I think you could. I'm not telling you to drop Olave, but I'm not holding my breath over Olave doing anything this year. Give me Ladd over Ricky Pearsall. Give me Ladd over Evan Ingram if I don't need a tight end. Give me Ladd and JT for Mixon. I would do that. If you can turn Kareem Hunt into Ladd, yes. Brian Thomas or Ladd McConkey. That's a coin flip that I would probably just chill on. I can't entertain that. We'll do Nick Chubb for Ladd. Yes, that's a yes. Ridley for Ladd. That's lateral. I'll chill on that. Let's look at one more. Some of these aren't as cut and dry. I would do Pacheco for Ladd. The calculator prefers Pacheco. I would trade Pacheco for Ladd McConkey pretty easily. Eckler for McConkey pretty easily. Bucky for McConkey pretty easily. But I think they give you kind of the gist. He's not going for a lot. He's pretty cheap, and I think he has a lot of upside down the stretch. Now, our 7th trade target here isn't necessarily one player, but I did just kind of want to show that if you're down bad, if you're 4-6, if you're 3-7, clinging on for dear life. Not saying that you can actually make these trades in practice, but I did just want to show just what you should be doing potentially if you're in a tough spot. This is Peaked in High School. This is his Twitter. Shout out at Peaked in High School _FF. He is somebody, him, Subverter Down, guys that I remember seeing on Reddit when I was coming up on Reddit. He has a trade value chart. Now, this trade value chart's not everything. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's just a decent gauge for me to show you guys as I just kind of talk through this idea of trading off your bye weeks, right? Again, if you are 3-7, 4-6, 5-5 in a league that maybe only has 4 playoff teams out of 12, you can't afford to have a bye week, right? So Arizona Cardinals, right? You can go find, if you have Marvin Harrison Jr., can you turn Marvin Harrison Jr. into Zay Flowers, Pickens? This, by the way, I'll actually give you a bonus buy here. I have Pickens ahead of Tyreek Hill as my wide receiver 9 in my rest of season rankings right now. I'm looking at this list right now. This is a bonus buy. Go buy George Pickens. If someone has George Pickens on their hands and they don't quite understand what they have on their team right now, go get him, dude, because this is absurd. The only receivers I would not trade straight up for George Pickens are literally all of these guys. I would trade Lamb straight up for Pickens. You could talk me into London straight up for Pickens. Actually, I'll chill on that. I'll do Lamb straight up for Pickens. Devontae easy, Evans easy, Higgins easy, McLaurin easy, Devontae easy, Marvin Harrison Jr. easy, straight up for George Pickens. But this is what I'm saying, right? You can look at this chart. You can find whatever chart pleases you. I'm just saying this is what I would be doing, right? If you have a bye week for Marvin Harrison Jr., you need a win this week. You look at, okay, this is Marvin Harrison Jr. Can I go turn Marv into Jacobs, Chase Brown, Aaron Jones, Montgomery? Can I turn him into Zay Flowers, Pickens, Reed? Maybe not Downs. I think that's a little crazy. But, you can go down. You don't want to sell yourself super, super short. But, can I turn Marv into one of these 4? Can I turn him into Metcalf and I give a bench running back on top? Just things to be thinking about. Right? We just talked about James Conner as a buy. But if you don't have the luxury to wait for him off of the bye week, if you need to sell him, James Conner for James Cook, Jacobs, Chase Brown, any of the guys here, of course, again, go buy Pickens. I can't stress that enough. Reed, like we just talked about, all of these guys, I'd be doing the same, same thing. Again, we called Malik Nabers a buy, but again, if you're in need, if you can turn Nabers into Puka, Cup, I mean, there's no chance anyone's valuing Nabers over St. Brown. But if you can do Nabers, in a piece for Brown, St. Brown, Wilson, London, Lamb, Debo. If you can do Nabers into Pickens, if you need points this week, the Ravens secondary sucks. I'll add that in the timestamps. Make this word. The title might be 7 trade targets. George Pickens is my 8th because this is ridiculous. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like Nabers into any of these guys. Like I would just go to trade charts, and this is what I would do as well. If you're just trying to avoid a bye week, you don't need the most perfect trade in the world, right? So you can go up. Like what I would do is I would just take my Nabers, and I would just go to the St. Brown guy, maybe offer him, and then that same offer, I would just go straight up down the board. Okay, send it to Garrett Wilson, send it to Drake London, send it to CeeDee Lamb. So you just have 8 trade offers floating around out there, just so you can avoid this bye week, live another week. Put all of your efforts towards week 11 here. So that's just kind of what I would be sort of running my head through. Same thing with Mike Evans here. If you need a win, Tampa's on bye, Evans is hurt. Somebody values Evans this much, where they'll trade any of these guys in this orange tier for him. Definitely do your due diligence there. So that's our 7 trade targets. I'll make sure that I put in the timestamps that the 7th one is dodging a bye week, but then also please go buy George Pickens. But that's going to do it for us today. Again, as always, make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy. They'll match your first deposit up to $1,000. And we should have a starts and stats video out tomorrow. We'll see. If not, we might do a stream instead. But appreciate you guys all following along. Hope all you guys win in your fantasy football matchups. It is crunch time, right? We have week 11, 12, 13, 14. So 4 weeks left to go. Then the playoffs. I think that next week will be our last trade target video. Because then you have Thanksgiving week. It'll be a short week anyways. 3 games happening on Thursday. And most trade deadlines, I think, happen. Like the latest is like Thanksgiving. So it'll be this will be this trade target video. And then we'll have one probably next week. And then that's it. So as always, if you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like. Subscribe if you're new. And I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm